Welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Before I start the full agenda of Cabinet, I'd like to take a moment to pay special tribute to the whole of Cabinet, but in particular Councillor Paul Griffiths, for the absolutely wonderful and able way in which they continue to work as a very effective, very collective Cabinet over the last 4 weeks while I've been convalescing from a hip replacement, and shown true collective leadership in a very busy and at times challenging period for the council. So thank you, Paul, for doing such a sterling job that I did wonder about coming back. But thank you for the whole of Cabinet for the extra mile that you have all gone and have continued to show since we took over the administration, of your dedication to making sure that we fulfil our commitments. So let's move on now to the full Cabinet agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Councillor Frances Taylor, who may be able to join us later, but she's not sure at the moment.
Okay, let's hope she can. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Good to see you online, Richard. I hope you're back to fighting fitness now.
Yeah, I might even be able to contribute today.
Always do. So we can move on to item 3, delivering excellence in children's services, foster care recruitment and retention, foster friendly policy. I think that's over to you, Councillor Chandler.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and welcome back. So, yes, Cabinet, I'm really pleased to be able to bring this policy to you for approval today, because our role as a corporate parent is one of the most important responsibilities that we carry. We do a great deal to support families, helping them to overcome the challenges that they face and to keep families together. But our overriding priority is protecting children, ensuring that they're physically and emotionally safe. And this means that despite our best efforts, sometimes children need to be brought into our care. And if a child is unable to be cared for by their family, we still want them to stay near to the area that they know, close to their friends and other family members, and ideally attending the same school. And we know that this can contribute to better outcomes for the child. And foster carers can make such a massive difference to children's lives when they're potentially at their most vulnerable. And this can be through providing long-term care or short-term emergency care, transitional care into adoption or independence, or short breaks to help support families in the community. So while fostering is life-changing, it doesn't have to turn your life upside down. So even just offering short breaks to a specific child could make all the difference for a child in enabling them to remain with their parents or foster carers, staying close to the communities that they know and the people that they love. And as a council, we really value our Monmouthshire Council foster carers, and our support to them includes an allocated social worker and specialist training, as well as access to the therapeutic and psychological support that can help carers work in the best way with the children that they're caring for. But unfortunately, pardon me, unfortunately, like other councils in Wales, we don't have enough of our own foster carers. So as a result, many children have to be placed through independent fostering agencies or in a residential home setting. And often these are not local to where the child was living with their family. So they're also costly. An independent foster agency placement can cost between £520 to £1,300 more per week than an in-house fostering arrangement. And furthermore, the Welsh Government's move to eliminate profit from children's care will lead to a situation where from 2027, local authorities will no longer be allowed to place children with for-profit independent fostering agencies. So for us, retention of existing foster carers and recruitment of new carers are both essential if we are to achieve placement sufficiency. Each year, foster carers obviously will be lost due to retirement or sickness or change of circumstances, other life events. An analysis by Foster Wales has indicated that by 2025, Monmouthshire Council needs to recruit an additional 30 fostering households to meet demand, as well as compensate for those leaving fostering. But if we are to come close to achieving this, we need to be able to make fostering for Monmouthshire an even more attractive option than it is now. And that's why I'm proposing and bringing to you for approval today that Monmouthshire County Council adopts a foster-friendly policy. It will be a valuable offer to MCC employees that independent fostering agencies just couldn't match. It could also provide a valuable starting point to encourage other employers in the county to adopt similar policies to support foster carers who foster for their local authority. Details of what's involved in this policy are in the paper, but in summary, the policy means that offering council employees an appropriate leave entitlement during their assessment to become a foster carer or a special guardian, or as well as following their approval as a foster carer or special guardian. And that additional leave entitlement for the responsibilities that they'll be taking on in those roles. And this would only, though, apply to staff who are fostering for local authorities, not staff who might be fostering with independent fostering agencies. Such a policy that I'm proposing is in line with the standardised approach that local authorities across Wales are taking in collaboration with Foster Wales. And it's part of a package of proposals that we're developing to make fostering for Monmouthshire County Council more attractive. Some of those proposals will require investment, but which overall will contribute to placement efficiency, a reduction in the reliance on high-cost independent fostering agency placements, but above all, improved outcomes for children. So I commend this proposal to you, Cabinet, for approval. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. I think this is really positive step forward. Cabinet, is there anyone who has some observations? Yes, Councillor.
Yes, please, if I may. Thank you for this proposal. Councillor Chandler, it's brilliant. As you can imagine, I'd be supporting it 100%. I will say I'm really pleased that it's being implemented in Monmouthshire first. It demonstrates the importance of encouraging everyone in Monmouthshire, not just people who are not employees. It brings in the fact that it's an added USP to bring in, to encourage people to join a local authority fostering team rather than an independent fostering agency. And I think it's really, really important. May I just ask one question? Do we have any Monmouthshire foster carers or special guardianships who are also Monmouthshire employees at the moment?
I'm going to ask Charlotte in a second to confirm this, but my understanding is that we have one current employer who is a foster carer, and we have another one who's going through the approval process at the moment. Is that right, Charlotte?
Yes, we have 2.5. So we have one connected person, one foster carer, and then we've got someone who does respite, so they would be entitled to half of the allocation. But that doesn't account for there may be other employees who are local authority foster carers for different local authorities, and we wouldn't know that at this point, but it's unlikely to be massive numbers. But hopefully it will just generate an environment where people feel encouraged and supported as local authority foster carers.
Absolutely, and I think it's brilliant. Well done.
Good to see you online, Charlotte. And thank you for putting together this along with the Councillor Chandler. If there's no more comments or questions, I think we'll move positively to the recommendation, which is to consider proposals for implementing foster-friendly policy and agree next steps, which are clearly laid out and have been laid out by Councillor Chandler. Are we all agreed, Cabinet? Just shake your hands online.
I think more than agreed. I think if we're approving this, also just to encourage everybody to take every opportunity to promote the idea of fostering with Monmouthshire Council and to just get in touch with Charlotte and the team and just take that first step.
I know you played down the numbers, Charlotte, but actually to have any staff at all participating in this way is to celebrate, and once again shows what a special council and special county Monmouthshire is, and how we all go out of our way to volunteer and to support our communities. We just show time and time again in different ways that we do, and this is a very special way to do it. So moving on to item 4. the revenue and capital monitoring month 6. That's over to you, Councillor Callard.
Thank you, Leader. I'm here presenting the month 6 revenue capital budget update. Month 6 took us to the end of September, and this report was published with the most up-to-date information at the time. There are quite a few recommendations in this report, and I'll read, I think, the most important ones for you, if it's okay. The main one being that at the end of month 6, we've seen a slight deterioration in the revenue budget deficit, which has increased by £160,000 to £284,000. It's my expectation that towards the end of the financial year, that gap will start to close, so we can be balanced by the end of the year. And there's a number of risks identified in this report. One of the biggest risks which we've seen over the last few months is the volatility in demand for some of the services that we provide that have continued to add cost onto the council. These services, it's very difficult to predict where the demand will come. So this is a risk that we will continue to carry. On top of that, we have got our budgeted council savings we need to achieve in order to balance our budget, and there is risk there to making sure that we achieve all of those savings. And this needs to be taken in the wider context of the national economic picture and the financial picture that we see coming from Welsh Government as well. And I'd like to commend this report over to the Cabinet for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Callard. Is there any questions or observations from Cabinet? And then Councillor John, I bring you in. Your questions are directed, I think, to different portfolio leaders. So, and as it's Christmas, why don't we take them one at a time?
Oh, what a treat. Thanks, Leader, and fab to see you back. Welcome back to your role after your recent break. A couple of questions, please, Leader. Firstly, how important is it to the administration that all councillors are cited on timely budget monitoring reports and that such reports go through the scrutiny process? Obviously, this is with reference to the fact that this report hasn't gone through scrutiny, which I think is regrettable, particularly given that in some of these monitoring reports you're making quite big decisions that impact on our residents. So can I have an answer on that firstly, please?
Very much so, Councillor John. Before I hand you over to Councillor Callard, you'll know that we've been consistent in our message that scrutiny and accountability is absolutely central to all that we do, and will continue to be so. On this particular report, I will hand you over to Councillor Callard to just take you through it.
Thank you, Councillor John. It's a good question, and scrutiny is something that we do feel is very important when it comes to the reports that this Cabinet considers, especially around finance. I think in this instance, what we've seen is a mismatch sometimes in the diaries between when Cabinet is considering these reports and when scrutiny committees meet and when the reports become available, which has regrettably caused some delay in the scrutiny of these reports. And I completely agree with you that the pre-decision scrutiny is always preferable in these circumstances. I am expecting us to continue to provide reports in a timely manner. I would also say that with the development of the budget recovery plan earlier on in this autumn, that required a considerable amount of resource for our finance team, which did impact on their capacity to produce these reports, which is why we saw some delay in the last finance reports that went to scrutiny. But it is something that we do believe is hugely important and will continue to be on top of.
Okay, thank you. What has been the impact on schools of the 2.8% cut in their funding this year, please?
I'm going to bring in Councillor Grocott to answer that question.
Thank you, Leader, and good afternoon, Councillor John. School balances have reduced from £4.3 million to £1 million, and that excludes the pupil referral service, which is funded in a slightly different way. Over recent years, schools have received a number of grants to support with catch-up following the time missed due to the pandemic. In addition to this, schools have seen pay pressures for all staff, which have impacted on school balances. The continued close monitoring of schools has identified schools that are at risk of going into a deficit budget, and early action to agree recovery plans will mitigate against some of this risk.
Okay, thank you. And my third question is, what are the implications of reducing staffing at the council's contact centre?
I'm going to
I don't know who that's to.
I'm going to bring in Councillor Sandler. It's under her portfolio.
Thanks for your question, Councillor John. And yeah, it's important. It's obviously tougher to deliver a service with less resource, but ultimately, as you will know, we monitor the data closely for impact. I've not seen an increase in complaints, and I believe that this is due in no small part to the wonderful Cheryl Haskell and her brilliant teams in the call centres for doing a fantastic job under sometimes challenging circumstances. If there are longer wait times, I understand that the team takes time to apologise to customers personally and will explain why with reasons. This human approach seems to be going a long way, and people are very understanding. As the technology we are using changes, we'll start to see improvements in the system, and we'll be delivering more for less in the customer world. We discussed the website, and we know that it needs investment, so that, you know, that's sort of ongoing. And to go alongside our software improvements, this is something we are keen to progress, as it will stop a lot of the direct calls and emails going into this space. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sandler. And thank you for those really important questions, Councillor John, because I do think they help to get to the heart of the matter, in that, like every other council, we are dealing with exceptionally challenging times and pressures on our budgets that could hardly be imagined 4 years ago, let alone 2 years ago, just before we took over the administration. And there are always choices to be made, but the choices we make is about putting our people first, whether they are our officers or our residents, but also ensuring that we consider fairness, decarbonisation and equality in all those decisions. And I think that has come across in this outturn report, that we are really bang on message in that way, but to accept at the same time that we continue to be absolutely rigorously monitoring this all the time, mindful that will have impacts on the budget that we're starting to shape now. And so, Cabinet, we come up to look at the recommendations. There are 7, which Councillor Callard clearly outlined to us. So I'm asking you whether you agree to these 7 recommendations.
Yeah.
Wave your hands online. Thank you. Let's move on to Councillor Callard again, Whole Authority Strategic Risk Assessment.
Thank you, Leader. This report gives an overview of the current strategic risks facing the authority. The assessment focuses on the things that could significantly jeopardise our ability to achieve the Council's objectives, statutory plans, or provide operational services as planned. It's an important part of our governance arrangements, ensuring that risks are identified and monitored, and that mitigation actions are appropriate and proportionate. It covers high and medium level strategic risks, with lower level risks managed through service business plans. An overview of the current risks is shown over 2 pages as Appendix 1, with more detail in the subsequent pages. The assessment was presented to the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee last month. They scrutinised the risk assessment and responsible officers to ensure that strategic risks have been appropriately identified and risk is being appropriately managed. An overview was also presented to Governance Audit Committee to fulfil the committee's role of assessing the effectiveness of the authority's risk management arrangements. Officers are working with the chair of that committee to ensure our approach is continually reviewed and updated. And any significant changes or updates made to each risk since this was last reported can be found in the key changes column in the summary table, and there's a summary of these contained in paragraph 34. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Callard. Is there any questions or observation from Cabinet? I think we're well aware, given just looking at the budget, but just looking at the very dynamic and volatile environment in which we're operating at the moment, that this risk assessment and risk register is absolutely core to our monitoring, and the rigour with which we ensure that we are following our policy commitments, but also not straying within the confines of the resource deficits that we meet. So come to you, Councillor John, because you've got a question you'd like to ask.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I wanted to ask about how individual Cabinet members are working with their respective officers to identify and assess risks within their portfolios, please.
Councillor Callard?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor John, for the question. We've got an established risk management policy and process, and a summary of this policy is attached in an appendix to the report with a full version available on the hub. Our approach allows risks to be identified by teams in their service business plans, or by the senior leadership team, or by Cabinet who add another strategic lens. Individual Cabinet members are able to flag risks with the responsible officers, who will then discuss it with the policy and performance team who oversee the process. Cabinet, they've been involved in challenge sessions with the senior leadership team to ensure that this is reflected in our shared understanding of risk. And risk is dynamic. It needs to reflect an ever-changing external environment, and there's a live version available on the hub, which officers and councillors can access at any point to give up-to-date information.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Callard. I think I'll move to the recommendation that we've reviewed and assessed is realistic, looking at the risks facing us over the next 3 years. We've clearly shown how we review this, and it is an ongoing process and will obviously remain so. So I think we agree. Can I have that agreement shown, Cabinet?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to item 6. School emissions policy. Step down, Councillor Callard, and have a well-earned glass of water. And we'll move on to Councillor Grocott.
Thank you, Leader. If I could start with recommendations, there are 3, and just to put each one into context. 2.1 talks about the process of consultation around primary school admissions, and suggests that we undertake and review on a rolling programme to ensure the catchment areas remain valid for their particular areas, and that should become the best practice from now on. 2.2 is about a specific consultation in the areas in the south of our county around the communities of Tredonoc, Llanhennock and Llandegfeth, which currently, following local government reorganisation back in 1996, have no catchment area schools. And it seems a good policy, a policy actually established by the last administration, that every primary school, every school should have a catchment area. And so I am asking Cabinet's approval that we begin a consultation with residents of those three areas. And the outcome of that would be that each of the communities would in future be given a catchment area. The third recommendation is around proposals that are included in Appendix 3 of the report around changes to the catchment area, specifically of Mitchell Troy and Cumcarvan, and whether we should consider proceeding to consultation on changing the catchment area school for those two communities. I would ask Cabinet in this specific incident in 2.3 that we in fact do not proceed at this point. If I can just put a little bit of bone onto 2.3. It's a different circumstance to those villages in the south because they already have a catchment area. It's Overmonnow School in Monmouth. Half or more of the children in those two communities, however, do go to school in Trellick. So we've got the slightly unusual position of the majority of pupils not going to the catchment school, and that's the parents' right. And I suppose the question to ask is, does that mean we should review the catchment areas? And the reason I'm recommending Cabinet that we don't is quite simply that at the moment, to change the catchment area would increase transport costs by considerably over £30,000 a year. I think it is generally known within the council that the coming financial year is going to be extremely challenging and that schools' budgets are going to be difficult. To be honest, and let me be quite blunt, I would rather spend that money on providing a teaching assistant to teach children with additional learning needs than to provide extra bus facilities for children who already attend schools which are providing a perfectly good education for which people seem quite happy. So at some point in the future, I would not be averse to undertaking a consultation, but it seems wrong to me to start that process knowing that it is unlikely to be successful because the demands of children in classrooms are limited, I think. So 2.1 is to note, 2.2 is to say, yes, we accept and will proceed with consultation. 2.3 is to say, we have received the proposals, but at this point, we will not continue with consultation to change the catchment school.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions or observations? So, Councillor John, I believe you have a question you'd like to ask.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. And firstly, can I thank the Cabinet member for his time? We've had some private conversations about this issue, as you'll know. Mitchell, Troy and Cumcarvan are in my ward. My group is supportive of ongoing primary school catchment reviews. It is something we have to look at from time to time. Absolutely agree with the recommendation about those areas to the south of Llangibby, and I fully support going to consultation there. I do feel disappointed that we're not going to consultation on the Mitchell, Troy and Cumcarvan proposals because the current catchment areas just don't reflect what's actually happening on the ground, and you've got a split that goes right through the community where half the village is closer to Overmonnow and the other half is closer to Trellick. So there's an element of unfairness there, particularly in relation to transport costs. So my question to the Cabinet member is, how important do you think it is that school catchment areas reflect existing community bonds?
Thank you, Councillor John, and thank you for acknowledging that we had a very civilised discussion about this issue earlier today. In response to your question, school catchment areas will reflect community bonds to a certain extent, but I wouldn't wish to exaggerate the importance of this. In Mitchell-Troy and Cwmcarven, for example, the local authority willingly provides free transport to take some children out of their community in order to attend schools based on faith, generally with the approval of their community. We are also currently trying to recruit more pupils to leave this area to attend a school in Monmouth, where the children will not only be removed from their local community, but also immersed in a language that will be new to many of them, Welsh. It would probably also be fair to say that a higher than average proportion of children in the local community of those two villages are removed from the local catchment schools in order to be educated at haberdasher schools in Monmouth. So I would not exaggerate the importance of local catchment schools in reflecting community bonds. And community bonds themselves are also difficult to define and probably very flexible in nature. 19th century rural communities are perhaps reflected in the verse from Mrs. Alexander's famous hymn, All Things Bright and Beautiful, which goes, the rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. And I remember singing that well in my primary school and indeed in my Church of England.
I thought you were about to sing it for us just then.
Don't tempt me, Councillor John. But those were the community bonds of their time. And I think we'd probably all be glad that they are no longer the community bonds. In the former western valleys of the original Monmouthshire, with their industrial nature, there was at one time strong community bonds that stretched from childhood to old age and forged through economic forces. Children might have gone to a village school, but then gone down the pit throughout adulthood and only ever left the village for any length of time if they had to go into the workhouse. So if a local school doesn't create community bonds, it could be argued that neither do the community's parents, because many of them who live in your ward, for example, will commute to work out of those villages every day, rather than building their economic livelihoods in them. And I remember Mitchell-Troy School, which closed in the 1990s. I remember it well because I had to speak at a party that was organised on the last day of its existence in my local authority role at the time. And the community has not collapsed with the closure of that school, nor do I hear voices asking for it to be reopened today. So let's not be romantic about schools and community bonds. Food banks and football or rugby teams are just as likely as anything else in forging a community togetherness. And how many of those children who attend Overmonnow or Trelech schools who live in Mitchell-Troy and Cwmcarven will live in those two communities when they're adults because of the cost of our housing in Monmouthshire. The two maintained schools serving Mitchell-Troy and Cwmcarven are both schools that are well supported and appreciated, but I don't necessarily agree that they reflect existing community bonds.
Okay, thank you. And if, as you say, Councillor Groker, if these issues can be kept on the table and perhaps they can be brought back at a future date, we'd be very keen to continue to engage in that.
I've told you that, and that will certainly be in my mind, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor John, and thank you very much for exploration and insight into community bonds, Councillor Grocott. I think we all learned something from that. We have 3 recommendations which I'm going to take separately because of the caveat explained to us by Councillor Grocott earlier. So the first one is for us to acknowledge the attached consultation document and agree that the review is needed. Do we agree, Cabinet?
Yes.
The second is to enter into a consultation that proposes amendments to one particular primary catchment area. Do we agree on that one?
Yeah.
On the third one, Councillor Grocott is recommending that we don't go to consultation for the reasons that he outlined very fulsomely. Do we agree with that proposal and that recommendation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Cabinet. I will move us on to the last item, item 7, and bring us back to Councillor Grocott.
This is simply to ask Cabinet to approve proposed changes within the new King Henry VIII 3 to 19 school that will come into effect to control its funding formula from the 1st of April 2025. The policy needs to start at the beginning of a financial year, and the school won't be on a single site until this coming April, and so that's why it is specifically April 2025, and it does mean that we're actually a year ahead in our planning, which is never a bad thing. The reason why we need to think about the funding formula for this school is that it's our first all-through school. So we've not got a policy for such an age range in existence. So the consultation has been completed, not a huge response, but a well-considered response and well-considered answers from our officers, I think, as well. It needs to take into account the fact that the rates for the new school will be considerably enhanced because of increased land values on the site. Otherwise, things really just fold the primary element and the secondary element into the new all-through school. So there will be a larger management team. There'll be a head teacher, 2 non-teaching deputies, 1 for each element of the lower and the older pupils, and then 7 teaching assistant head teachers. The school will also have 2 special resource bases, 1 for the lower school and 1 for the middle and upper elements of the school. And the funding for these will be in line with the current formula. In fact, the age-weighted pupil unit that we're recommending will remain the same for all our schools. And the only differences in funding will be because this is a brand new school, and the elements that are different are around the fact that maintenance costs will be different because all the equipment will be brand new, and so maintenance costs will be lower as a result. The formula that is being used is the one that delegates funding to mainstream schools and also mainstream schools with additional learning needs. So there's nothing new there. And as I say, the only area of increased funding is to acknowledge the higher rateable value of the land there. Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee have looked at these issues. They've made comment as part of the review, and now the last step is that we rubber stamp it almost. It's gone through consultation, it's gone through scrutiny. Now it comes to Cabinet, and once it's in place, it lies dormant until April 2025, but then it enables the financial arrangements for the new school to be in place and underway.
Thanks, Councillor Grocott. I think that's fairly straightforward. We have no external questions. I know it's been indicated to me that we don't have any questions coming from Cabinet, so I suggest we go straight to recommendations that we approve this changes with effect from the 1st of April 2025 and commend Councillor Grocott and the officers for being so timely and ahead on this. Are we agreed, Cabinet?
Yeah. Yes.
With that, we bring the end to. Oh, I thought you were waving to say something there, Councillor Griffiths. Thank you. And with that, we come to the end of Cabinet. Thank you very much, everyone. This is the last Cabinet of 2023, so I would like to wish you all a very happy Christmas and a joyful and peaceful New Year in whatever way you choose to celebrate it. And see you all next year. Thank you very much.
Flowing, Bob.
Natalie Flowen.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Merry
Thank you.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Yeah.